Welcome to The Alternative Investor. For a number of years, thousands of classic car aficionados travel extensively to motor shows and other events around the world to view some of the most head-turning classic cars. And many hope to one day own one of these iconic cars, not only for the emotional reasons, but also because they could increase in value over time. The world of classic car collection and classic motoring memorabilia has gone from a small group of enthusiasts to a multi-million-dollar industry. But where does that leave you and me? To look at whether classic cars are a good investment or not, I'm joined by Tommy Roes, who is from Value in the Classic Car Market Conference. Tommy, thank you so much for your time.
Anastasia, good day. Thank you for having me, and good day to all your listeners.
So let's talk about how viable, classic car collection is. I mean, how big is the demand in South Africa?
So it's a great question, and I think that can be sort of divided up in many different conversations. I think it's very clear to say that, the market is absolutely enormous. I think there's so much passion and enthusiasm that comes with, buying a piece of history, whether it's a classic car, and some of the other alternative assets that I know that you do, cover on the show. And I think the bottom line is that, the more, the wealth shifts in this country, the more a new generation comes up. There are more participants in the market, and there are only so many of these classic cars available. And so unfortunately, the demand does exceed the supply, and so I think there's a lot of interest in the market right now. There has been for many years in this country, but yeah, to answer your question, there is obviously a supply and demand constraint in this country.
And I'm sure many of our viewers are wondering what makes a classic car versus, an old car that you probably have at home.
It's a very good question. It's one of those, it's a very subjective thing. It's, something that maybe, that I would consider classic, or something that I might have, looked up to as an idol for myself when I was growing up. You might look at something, like that, and you might think that it's just, an old piece of junk. So it is a very subjective question. And I think that it's kind of, we prefer to leave it up to the market to decide, what is a classic and what is just an old car. And I think the best way to do that is to look at what that particular car would have cost when it, originally came to market back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever the case may be. And just seeing what that car would cost today, perhaps making an adjustment for inflation. And I mean, look, if that car is, costs more today than it would have the day that it was launched, then I think, it's a safe bet to say that car has then been, defined as a classic.
I can imagine a lot of these cars come with a massive price tag. What are the other alternative ways for one to get exposure to some of these cars if you don't necessarily have, I suppose, the hundreds and thousands of rands to buy a vintage Mercedes-Benz, for instance?
It's very exciting to get involved, in getting into your first car, or at least take ownership.
We seem to be having a connection issue with Tommy, but basically what we wanted to talk about, the private equity funds that do allow people to get involved with collectible cars, and you could actually buy shares in some of the companies that do have exposure to some of those collectibles. We're going to try with Tommy once again. Tommy, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry, we lost you there for a second. So you were talking about the different ways for one to get exposure to some of these collectible cars.
Yeah, so obviously, historically speaking, it's always been those that have access to the money, have been able to acquire these cars over the years. As more and more people have become enthusiastic and become passionate about these cars, people are starting to look at different ways to get into them. And so a number of, I suppose, alternative ways of participating have come about. None so successfully in South Africa yet, but there's some incredible things going on around the world. Guys, for example, there's an outfit in New York City who've managed to take advantage of an SABC regulation, which allows them to take a single car, a single asset, private, very quickly. So in essence, you are able to buy shares in an asset, literally from the from the ease of your mobile phone. And we're talking cars, watches, wine. It's an incredible range of collectible assets that you can physically buy shares in for the average man on the street that wants to get involved. So beyond that, I know that there have been a numerous attempts at private equity fund type scenario. It's essentially a number of collectible cars in the basement, all theoretically appreciating value over a fixed term. We're not sure that any particular outfit has done that successfully, although there have been numerous attempts, but it's only a matter of time before somebody gets it right.
You mentioned that classic car collection, some models, it may be a subjective investment when it comes to deciding what makes a classic car a classic car. For a viewer out there, what should they be looking at if they're actually looking at, I suppose, getting involved in classic car collection?
So I think the best way to answer that question, and it's something that I tell a lot of my clients, is that I think you need to be very clear on three questions, and that is, what do you like, what are you going to do with it, and what are you prepared to spend? Because, obviously the price point on these collectible cars is very wide. So you need to obviously understand that you're able to afford this car, not just to afford the outright purchase for the car, but the ongoing maintenance. I think something the car collectors will tell you is that they are by nature, if they're car collectors, they're also real estate investors. You obviously have to have somewhere to park these cars as well. And of course, what is it that you actually like? Because, if you are investing in a car purely for the financial gains, the financial aspects of it, what happens if there's a turn in the market and suddenly that car is depreciating in value? Well, then at least you have something that you like, that you can enjoy to look at, that you can share with your friends and family, and it's just an absolute joy to have. And then, of course, the third question is...
Right. Tommy, we'll have to leave there. Thank you so much for your time. That is Tommy Roes, who is from VCCM, talking to us about how you can get involved in classic car collection. That's it from me. I'll be back tomorrow with Books on Point.